Hello, my name is Bruce Cole. I'm the director of the New Mexico Securities Division, the state agency whose job is to protect New Mexicans from investment fraud and financial abuse. Unlike burglary, auto theft, or other property crimes, investment fraud is a stealth crime that may continue for months or in some cases even years before the victims realize they've been cheated. Unfortunately, in many of these cases, the victims rarely recover their money. Sadly, perpetrators may often be a trusted friend, business associate, or in some cases even a family member. In what we call affinity fraud, perpetrators may pose as respectable members of the community, and through their membership in civic, social, and religious groups may seek to lure their victims. The case you are about to see is one that was investigated and successfully prosecuted by my office here in New Mexico. It is my hope that the lessons you take from this case may help protect you from becoming a victim of investment fraud. Finally, I would encourage you to contact the New Mexico Securities Division to learn more about investment fraud, or if you believe you've been a victim of this crime. Our contact information will appear at the conclusion of this documentary. Thank you very much for your indulgence. And now, Betrayal of Trust.
My name is Gina Willamitis, and I work for the New Mexico Securities Division. We're in Chimayo, in the mountains above Santa Fe, and this is the Santuario de Chimayo, one of the most famous churches in the Southwest. People say miracles can happen here, if you believe. Unfortunately, our story today has no miracles. It's a story about faith, fraud, and betrayal of trust. It all began not far from here in a church near Taos, nearly 20 years ago, and it ended in an Albuquerque courtroom.
After almost a decade on the run, a man accused of defrauding New Mexicans out of millions of dollars is finally facing what he tried to avoid.
He was indicted more than 11 years ago. Now, the long-delayed trial of Henry Rivera has started. News 13's Michael Herzenberg joins us with more.
Erica, Henry Rivera told investors he would buy property at cut-rate prices from the government, sell at a profit, and return more money to them quickly. The prosecution calls it a scheme. The defense denies it.
The defendant is presumed to be innocent.
Henry Rivera is facing a maximum of 135 years in prison if convicted.
Between 1988 and 1993, this defendant right here, Henry Rivera, took hundreds of thousands of dollars from at least 18 victims in a fraudulent real estate investment scheme.
The prosecution claims Rivera met his victims through churches around the state, promising them as much as 30% interest in 30 days.
I always will say we, I'm sure, because it was my husband and I at all times of our dealings with Henry Rivera, or when we met him, was at church in Guyena, New Mexico.
I met Henry initially probably about 20 years ago in Taos at a church service.
Married and the father of 3, Henry Rivera was born and raised in Taos. Although he failed the test to become a licensed stockbroker and an investment advisor, he was an independent agent for a national insurance company. A talented musician, he often performed for his own congregation and other churches around the state. He also organized and led a series of musical pep rallies to bring an anti-drug message to New Mexico school children. To all appearances, Rivera was a solid businessman, a committed Christian, and a man to be trusted.
The way Henry Rivera represented himself as a very prosperous man.
Every time I saw Henry, meticulously dressed, very neat, almost to a fault.
Affinity fraud is a type of fraud where one individual of a common group, such as a civic organization or a religious organization or a social organization, will make an investment offering to other members of that group. And the investment offering itself may be either not suitable for the other members, or it may be a fraudulent offering. Because of that individual's connection to the group, the other members of the group are more accepting of that person.
Mr. Rivera called this an investment and a quick return investment, and my husband and I, why and how we got started with this was that our church at that point in time, we were building a new church.
We were to be able to invest so much money, and then he would give us a piece of paper saying that we invested so much money, and he would buy the discount mortgages and then sell them, and then that's how we would get to our, we would get our return.
And he presented it from a very friendly basis of, you know, Bill, I have this investment that a lot of people are in, and you've done so many favors for me over the year. I'm not looking for any more investors, but as a favor to you, I'm going to allow you, if you want to enter into this.
We talked with our pastor, and because he felt that he was an honest, etc. individual, was why we, shall we say, well, I shouldn't use that word, but that we got hornswoggled.
A securities fraud is a kind of fraud where one individual defrauds another out of generally money utilizing a security. And a security can be very broadly defined. Some of the more traditional securities are things like stocks and bonds, but it can also be more exotic types of financial instruments. We've prosecuted cases involving promissory notes, involving stock in a corporation, partnership interests, and we've involved situations, or have prosecuted situations in which individuals have just promised profit participation, that they're going to invest your money in some way and they'll provide part of the profit back to you.
Marty and I both invested $180,000 apiece. Not all at once. We started out with $10,000, and then we went to $20,000. And
I invested $145,000.
I got my father involved, and he put in $20,000. My father put in $30,000. My sister put in $20,000. They lost their money.
We believe that Mr. Rivera took somewhere around $3 to $4 million from investors in the state of New Mexico.
Henry's scheme was a classic Ponzi fraud. In a Ponzi, the con man uses new investors' money to pay back early investors some return on their investment that he has promised them. Trouble is, there is no investment, only empty promises. In order for a Ponzi to work, the con man must constantly seek new victims. When the cash flow dries up, the scheme collapses, and that's what happened to Henry Rivera.
Then all of a sudden, the involvement changes completely from Henry contacting me almost daily, are you interested, do you want to get in, etc., to after he had the money, I wouldn't hear from him for weeks. Post office box, and on the business card it presented it as his business address, and it wasn't. He wouldn't return telephone calls, etc., etc. So at that point, it was getting bad.